Good day, Black Knight scholars. We meet again. We're on to Unit 9. We're going to be studying the Cold War, modern India, and modern Africa in this, our last unit of the year. Lesson 1 starts with the start of the Cold War. We're going to be talking about the years 1945 through 1948, when the United States and its allies and the Soviet Union and its allies fight a war that is cold. Do we need this blanket? Is it that kind of cold? We'll talk about it. First, background on the Cold War. This was a competition between the United States and the Soviet Union, and it laid the foundation for the Cold War. Here you see Uncle Sam going up against the bear that is the symbol of the USSR. More background. The Cold War influenced the policies of the United States and the USSR towards other nations and led to conflicts around the world. And the big fear was that the US or the Soviet Union or one of its allies would use nuclear weapons. Why is it called the Cold War? Well, a hot war would be a war in which nuclear weapons are used, which might destroy humanity if enough of them are used. And Cold War is a term that describes a conflict that does not involve military actions, but is fought with economic and political moves and through propaganda and acts of espionage or spying. That's the difference between a hot and a cold war. The first major meeting of the Cold War was the Yalta Conference. Yalta is in present-day Ukraine, just west of the Soviet Union. Here it is. And it was a meeting in February 1945 between Britain and its Prime Minister, Winston Churchill, the United States, and its president at the time, Franklin Roosevelt. He actually dies 3 months after this meeting. And the Soviet Union, and here is its leader, Joseph Stalin. At this meeting, the USSR gains control of land in Eastern Europe, and Germany and Berlin is divided. So it's an important meeting to set the groundwork for the Cold War. And here are the different territories within Germany that are divided up. Great Britain gets the northwest corner. The United States gets the southeast corner. France gets the southwest corner. And East Germany, including East Berlin, is taken over by the Soviet Union. How did a rivalry develop between the US and the USSR anyway? At the end of World War II, let's remember, they fought together. So how did they break apart? Well, the US and its allies feared that the Soviet Union would take over Eastern Europe, transform it to a communist or totalitarian government, like was the case in Nazi Germany or fascist Italy or Japan, and spread its power around the world. So the US feared Stalin and the Soviet Union would spread its tentacles and its communist ways throughout the world. Let's get a profile of these two rival nations. First, ding, 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 it's the United States. The capital of the United States is Washington, D.C. There it is. 250 million people live in these United States, 50 of them, and the leader of the United States is called a president, and the president is elected by the people. And let's talk now about the Soviet Union. Ding, ding, ding. Its capital is Moscow. There it is. There are 290 million people, and 15 separate republics make up the Soviet Union. And the Soviet Union's leader is called a premier, and the premier is appointed by the Communist Party. The people do not get to elect the premier. One man helped make the rivalry even more bitter. His name, British Prime Minister Winston Churchill. Here he is. He calls the new divide between the Soviet Union and the U.S. the Iron Curtain in a speech in Missouri in March 1946. And here he is at the lectern actually giving that speech. And Churchill's divisive language feeds this rivalry, starting a propaganda war between these two countries. And you're about to see now footage of the speech, Churchill himself speaking, and more information about how the bitter rivalry gets even more bitter.
From Stettin in the Baltic to Trieste in the Adriatic, an iron curtain has descended across the continent. Behind that line lie all the capitals of the ancient states of Central and Eastern Europe: Warsaw, Berlin, Prague, Budapest. All these famous cities and the populations around them lie in what I must call the Soviet sphere.
To stop the Soviet Union, the US president at the time, Harry Truman, adopts his famous Truman Doctrine, his set of beliefs. In 1947, he says that the US must support a policy of containment. Containment means to stop the spread of communism and limit it to areas already controlled by the Soviet Union. And this photograph is Harry Truman himself giving a speech to Congress that outlines the Truman Doctrine, this idea of containment. There's been critique of the Truman Doctrine in recent years. The historian Eric Fulmer, for example, he says that the Truman Doctrine set a precedent for American assistance to anti-communist regimes throughout the world, no matter how undemocratic those regimes, those ruling countries. In other words, the Truman Doctrine set a precedent for America being the policeman of the world. Should we? That's up for debate. The North Atlantic Treaty Organization, or NATO, was a military alliance formed in 1949 to contain communism. And all of the countries in blue are NATO countries. So Canada, the US, most of Western Europe, and NATO's headquarters are in Brussels, Belgium, right here. Well, if the West is to have an alliance, the Soviet Union is to as well. In response to NATO, the Soviet Union forms its own military alliance in 1955 called the Warsaw Pact. So here's the Soviet Union and its vast land, and here are the other Warsaw Pact countries, which are largely Eastern European countries. In the Warsaw Pact, the Soviet Union allied with its satellite countries. These are nations dependent on another country for economic, political, and military power. So these Eastern European countries became the Soviet Union's satellite countries: Poland, Romania, and so forth. And now we are almost done, ladies and gentlemen. We just need to finish our summary questions. Let's do that now. More on that next lesson. Until that time, this is Mr. Deegan signing off.